Hello and welcome to another episode of the Empowering Leaders podcast. At Aleda, we are passionate about inspiring connections and creating a world of collaboration. Our signature program, Aleda Connect, curates groups of 5 to 6 leaders from diverse backgrounds in sport, industry, social venture and the arts who come together to learn, to connect and to collaborate.
It's been amazing. Here you are on this Zoom call, feeling within the first session like you intimately know these people and care for them. And then all of a sudden realising that even though you're in totally different industries, we're all going through the same thing, or we've been through it and we can help each other, or there's just this hurdle that you can't see past, and then you share it with the group and there's 5 answers in 40 minutes and you think, I have not slept for 2 weeks thinking about that. Like, how is this possible?
So you're listening to stories and the breadcrumbs of what makes success, and I constantly get something out of these Zoom calls and catch-ups because we're all living the same stuff, aren't we?
Extraordinary people with extraordinary experience. What happens there is magical.
The Empowering Leaders podcast is proudly brought to you by Victoria University, where cutting-edge sports and exercise science facilities like heat chambers, performance labs and altitude environments mean VU is ranked 7th in the world for sports science. VU, uniquely you. As always, a big thank you to Jason Nicholas and his team at Temper Bedding, a mattress like no other. If you enjoy listening to the Empowering Leaders podcast, be sure to subscribe, and please, if you have a moment, we would love you to leave a review so we can reach more listeners and empower more leaders. For over 4 decades, Bruce McAvaney has been one of the world's most iconic and respected sports broadcasters, a Hall of Fame broadcaster, an Australian Football Hall of Famer who has earned a legendary reputation as the voice of some of the most iconic sporting events on the planet, including a remarkable 12 Summer Olympic Games.
This is a famous victory. What a legend. What a champion.
20 Australian Rules Grand Finals.
The damn wall is busted. It's 62 long years.
World Athletic Championships, World Swimming Championships, the Melbourne Cup, the Rugby World Cup and countless more. Bruce McAvaney's passion and expertise has seen him become as much of Australia's sporting culture as the games themselves, a broadcasting giant whose voice is synonymous with some of the most iconic moments in the history of sport. Macca, great pleasure to see you.
That's quite a build-up, Das. Now, Das, I'll get one thing straight. I don't keep stats on myself. I've got no idea how many of these things I've done unless I ring Josh Kay and say, Josh, help me out, who you know from Channel 7. So, generically speaking, you were spot on. With the detail, I'd have to check.
We'll get an email from Josh Kay if it's more than 12 Summer Olympics, I'm sure. But I think I've probably undersold you on every...
No, I think you've made me blush, to be truthful. But when I hear all that, Das, what I think is, I've had some opportunities. That's what I think. How fortunate I've been.
When I look at you, Mac, I love this saying, you can't manufacture passion. When I see you, all I think of is this extraordinary level of passion, almost more than any other person I've ever met. I think you love what you do. Where does that come from?
You're not the first person that sort of chatted about that to me. And it surprises me when people say that about me because I know I love it, but I don't feel like I love it any more than anyone else loves it. It comes from my mother and father right from the start. You know, grew up as a little boy in Adelaide and Mum and Dad loved their sport and they'd tell me stories about, great horses and great cricketers and great footballers, and they make it so romantic and champions and battle against the odds, and so that's where it comes from. It comes from having 2 parents that looked at sport probably in a similar way to I do now, and it ignited a curiosity and I guess that passion in me from a young age.
My mind was immediately going to my grandfather, my dad's dad, and the same storytelling of he saw Bradman at the MCG, he saw Farlap at Flemington, he saw John Coleman was his hero. He thought John Coleman was the best sportsman he'd ever seen. And they're the images that sort of light up your world. And when I got the privilege to walk into a commentary box at the MCG, I used to always remind myself what a privilege it is to be sitting in the best seat in the house. And occasionally you bump into a cranky journalist who'd be talking the game down, but never you. If you saw you knew you were going to be filled with an anecdote or something that was... Did you do that consciously, or was that just you being you?
I think that's who I am, because there's a couple of things there. I know how hard it is to be an elite sports person, how difficult it is. Even if you're not the best player in the team, even if you're the worst player in the team, you were the best player at your club at some stage when you were growing up. I was a young kid that wanted to play league footy, and I wasn't good enough, but I was not a bad footballer. So I look at it that way, Das. I say to myself, okay, not everyone's perfect. They're going to make mistakes during the match, and some are better than others, but they're all good. They're all good. And that's the way I probably go about things.
It's why I always loved, and all of us loved your style because of that. You celebrated people. Again, I'm going off on a tangent, but it feels like, in this part of the world, Australia, we're now following that American style. How do we land the heaviest blow on an athlete or go for the most hyperbole we can? How do you relate to that style of broadcasting?
Look, we all do it our own way.
Yeah.
And there's no right or wrong, but I know what's right for me.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to judge others, Das, but there's a lot of competition, a lot of voices, a lot of TV shows, and executives want results, people to watch. So life's changed since I started broadcasting football in a big way. So look, we all do it our own way. We do it the best way we can. I think consistency is the key. If you are what you are, then you stay true to it.
Good balanced answer, Mac. I expect nothing less from you being your authentic self. Your preparation for what you do is legendary. A lot of us saw that as homework and hard work. It seems to me that you love that as much as the event itself. Is that true?
I do. The prep's as exciting for me as the performance.
You mean that really?
I do, because I'm curious. Yeah. And the more you find out about somebody or something, then it gives you that opportunity to talk about that when you're performing. But the minute Das, I don't want to do the prep, I won't want to do the performance. So they go hand in hand. Look, it was a funny thing. I wasn't a good student. There were a couple of subjects I wasn't bad in, but I do treat my job as if it's a studious treatment, and it's a build-up during the week of something, and I become more and more interested in it. And by the time I get to the ground, I feel like I'm in pretty good shape to enjoy what I've tried to learn during the week.
Yeah, and you've seen that. I've had the privilege of seeing that firsthand, and you can just see the highlighters and the handwritten notes and the anecdotes that come to you freely. And if you never had a day where you thought, wow, I'm just not up for this 4 hours of
I do.
Yeah.
No, I have those days. I had one yesterday, actually. So we're talking on a Friday afternoon. I had one yesterday where I was in a bit of a quagmire with some preparation for an athletics meeting I'm doing. So I've got little things I do that change that. So I do some easy stuff for an hour. I'll give myself a break. I'll go and have a cup of tea. I'll take the dog for a walk, whatever. I know there are certain things I have to do to feel right. But I do get like that, but I know how to switch off and then switch back on. And when I switch back on, I'm back into it. So it's a bit weird, but it's just the way it is.
Media can be a brutal game as well, Macca, and you've been this high-profile public face of networks and been on television for 4 decades. And there is some dark arts that goes on in this world, and people have tried to cut you down over the journey, and we've all seen that being in the industry, and ridiculous things said behind your back and rumours about you. Did that take some skin off you at various stages? How'd you cope?
It does. I mean, you're just not, I think, telling the truth if you say nothing bothers me, because everything bothers you. Because, look, there's two sorts of criticisms in a generic sense. There's the ones that are fair, and they hurt. because we're all pretty good judges. You'd be the same of how you're doing.
Yeah.
So there's one that's fair. At the end of this interview, you're going to spend the next hour thinking, how did I go? And I'm going to spend the next hour thinking, how did I go? So there you go. So let's get that straight from the start. So the ones that are fair hurt, and the ones that are unfair hurt. So they both hurt. They hurt in different ways. Yeah. So you're frustrated with the ones that are unfair, and you feel immediately like you want to right it all, but you can't. And the ones that are spot on, then you say to yourself, well, how can I improve? So look, they do hurt. I absolutely 100% never look at social media. A, don't really know how to, and B, have no interest. And in the end, it's a small group of people that I look to for, I guess, reassurance that I'm still doing pretty well. And one of them, obviously, is myself.
Yeah.
So it's hard to us. You can be overwhelmed at times. And if you're a fragile soul, then you're hanging on for dear life a lot of the times. It's a pretty tough world.
Yeah.
But the rewards are incredible because, as I said to you earlier, when you read out some of the things I've been able to do over the years and see, not just call, then, the plus side's so much greater than the negative.
Yeah. And I don't want to harp on the negative at all because there's so much to celebrate. But it felt, as an outsider, not knowing you, felt like some of that's targeted, that there's almost a campaign because, you're valuable. You make money for a network. Did it ever feel like that? Did you ever feel like, hey, there's a team out here having a real go to try and undermine you, or you just didn't know that?
Look, possibly. There's been one or two instances over the years where it's probably been a bit targeted.
Yeah.
And what do you do, Luke? What do you do about it? No, I've got Annie, my wife, is she knows the business back to front, and she's such a good person for me in lots of ways, but in this area she's really good, and we'll have a chat about things. I'll give you a quick example. There was something written about me quite recently, actually, that was completely wrong. Every line was incorrect. It made me out to be mercenary, that I'd sought a job with a network at the Olympics. I could go on. It was a photo in the paper. I was aligned to something. I was like a drive-by. Now, I had two choices there. One was to really take them on, or one was just to let them know they got it wrong, and it's up to them whether they want to write it. They don't want to write it. I'm not going to take them on. You move on. It's pretty cruel, and it wasn't pleasant. But so you've got to live with it. Not easy, and I'm sure if I keep working in the industry for the next 3 to 5 years, there'll be times where I think to myself, oh boy, what do I do about this? Because it's unfair. But that said, I'm far from perfect. I've had a lot of things I would like to have taken back over the years as a caller. And I feel like I've let myself down quite a few times. But that's the business we're in, Luke.
Yeah.
It's live and it's reaction. And none of us are foolproof. So you've got to understand that.
Yeah. I think the thing I've admired at you, Macca, from afar, and the occasional time I had the pleasure to sit in a commentary box with you is just the relationship you've got everywhere. You walk in and you've got a great relationship with wardrobe and with the makeup team and the cameramen and women. And again, it just, is that a conscious thing for you? You've always been a great team player, is how I'd describe you. Did you think about that, or is it, again, you being you?
I think it's me being me, and it gets back to mum and dad probably. In this way, maybe mum more than dad in some ways, because I think everyone is equal. We all do our job as well as we possibly can. And I know that as a television performer, two of the most important people in my life are makeup and wardrobe. And then the third one is the floor manager.
Yeah.
How important they are. You've got to feel good in your clothes. You've got to think like you're looking all right. And then you have that floor manager. So those people are just as important to me as Lee Matthews and Dennis Cometti, who were so important to me, amongst others. So that's how that's me. And I believe it wholeheartedly. I also think we're a team. Some of us are playing at centre half forward, and some of us might be playing in the back pocket. But without everybody, we can't do what we're doing. So that's, I guess, in a nutshell, how I feel.
Yeah. And the other thing I loved about, if you bumped into Macca, there was a great chance that you're going to bump into Shaun. And Shaunie is not so young anymore, but has been a part of your life for a long, long time now. Can you share that story of your great friendship? And you've had an incredible impact on his life. And where did that start?
I spoke to him yesterday, and I'll be seeing him tomorrow. He's coming to the athletics with me. He rings me every Thursday at 11 o'clock Adelaide time, no matter where he is in the world, which is usually in the same spot, or where I am. So Shaun Gallagher. So he's 62. He'll be 63 on December the 9th this year. Shaunie, I hope I got that right. I met him in the betting ring at Flemington in 1985.
God.
So we go back a fair way. It's 40 years. And yep. And then Mr. McAvaney. And then I let him I took him up into the broadcast box after a few weeks and haven't been able to get rid of him. I mean, you reckon Lingy was a good run with player. Shaunie's got, he could do Lingy inside out. So he's been running with for 40 years. Now, so he's a oxygen deficiency when he was born.
Yep.
So incredible mother, Suzette, who's in her 80s, and unbelievable because she says no to nothing.
Yeah.
Shaunee asks a lot and she tries to do everything she possibly can. Beautiful family. His brother has got a very big job in Los Angeles in the media world. Simon was a good runner. His sister Penny tragically died in her 40s, and that's been unbelievably sad for everybody, and she was such a great help to Suzette with Shaunee. So Shaunee's special. There's only one.
Yeah.
I've got a lot more out of Shaunee than he's got out of me.
I'm not sure about that, Macca, because it's, again, it's a full-on job. There's every reason that's a hard thing to do, to literally have someone in tow the whole time. And if you meet Shaun, he's just one of those great people. You want to smile the scene. So, but there's some management too. Shaunee's
it is. No,
it takes some work, but you've changed his life in a way that no one else really could have, and that must be something. It sums you up to me in one story, but it's an incredible story.
I've had a lot of help. I was solo for a while, but so many others have picked up the bat. And look, it's amazing. Jared Healy did an incredible job with him, and Tim Watson was great with him, and he's got a lot of people that have been superb. No, he's enriched my life, and look, he's so much fun. We all know, and look, he's no filter, Das. If you work for anyone but Channel 7 or his favourite radio racing station, you're a rat bag. It's as simple as that. And it's a funny world. The Shaunee world's unique.
He called me fake Triple M every time I saw him. Not the real Triple M.
Triple M's in Adelaide.
Oh, in Adelaide.
Yeah, you've got to be in Adelaide. You've got to be calling out of Adelaide, and you and Jimmy and Billy, you're all fakes. And no matter what you do, Das, you cannot change it.
I've got to transition from that to a current story, and I know this is why you're in town at the moment. I saw you spend some time with Gout Gout. Can you tell us a bit about this incredible young Australian athlete?
Look, what he's doing it's hard to get your head around. But so he's running times. He's the fastest 16-year-old over 200 metres, quicker than Bolt. He's been able to get to a place quicker than anybody else in world history, but we've never had a male sprinter quite like him. Now, at the moment, we're enriched us with some great talent in sprinting for men and in track and field full stop. We're going through a golden period, but this is the shining star because he's off the charts, so to speak. So he's run 20.04 legally for 200 metres. He ran 19.98 a couple of weeks ago in Brisbane. He's just turned 17, so 29th of December is his birthday, turned 17. He's well coached by old school Di Shepherd, extremely well managed as well by James Templeton, and knows his way around the tracks. He's one of 7 children. So Gout's older brother was born in Sudan, his older sister in Egypt on their way to Australia, as it turned out. He was born in Ipswich, and then there's 4 others, twins and etc. Mum, Monica, Dad, Bonner. Dad's a really hard-working. They're battlers in many ways, and Mum. So that's their family. He's a Year 12 student. He had exams this week, by the way, and he's going to run Saturday tomorrow night. So he's highly motivated and very well mannered. It's a beautiful combination. Yeah. So I did get to spend quite a bit of time with him. And he looked me in the eye and he shook my hand, he called me Bruce. And you forget how young he is. So he's got all the flair and all the pomp that good sprinters should have, the great ones, but he's also got a lot of respect. So I'm excited about him as a human being, what he might do with his life away from the track, but I'm extremely excited about how good he might turn out to be because none of us know. Yeah. You're a child prodigy, so to speak, not child, but young prodigy. And we know that in the world of athletics and any sport that nothing's taken for granted. So we'll see how it ends up. But we're on a journey with him, Das, and on a journey with a male sprinter that we haven't really seen the likes of before in Australia.
So that transition from elite 17-year-old running those times, there's still hurdles to jump figuratively and literally, isn't there, to become the champion elite male athlete? It's still a path to navigate.
If he runs 20.04, he probably makes the Olympic final at the moment.
Yeah.
And that's where he's at. So, the world record is 9.58 for 100 metres and 19.19 for 200. Those world records are now 16 years old. So they've stood for a long time. They were set by a bloke who was 22 years of age when he did it, Usain Bolt.
22 at the time.
So you think about Bolt, great young athlete, and we're comparing his times with Gout. Bolt ran his fastest times when he was 22. He never got any quicker, but he went on to win 6 more Olympic gold medals. So what it says is that, you can still be great, but everyone reaches their absolute peak at a different age. Carl Lewis's fastest 100-metre time was at the age of 30. Bolt's was at 22. Now, I'm picking those two out because they're the two best I've seen over a long period now, 1983, 84 through to 2016 with Bolt. So they're the two best, I think, probably ever in terms of male sprinters. There's an argument with Bob Hayes and a few others. One did it at 30 and one did it at 22. So what's Gout going to do? So we've got to understand he's just not going to keep improving like he is at the moment. So the challenge for him is that he's got to try and find another almost second to be the best in the world. And the two people that are probably standing in front of him at the moment are both young. One's 21 and one's 20. One's from Botswana and one's from the United States. And he can see those targets. Let's see where he's at the end of this year at the World Championships in Tokyo, and then from there on going into the Los Angeles Olympics. So it's a huge challenge, but he's getting there quicker than these blokes that I'm talking about. So we'll see what he can do by the end of the year.
I love listening to the encyclopedic knowledge that comes out of you. You haven't got a note in front of you and that stuff's just off the top of your head, dates and ages and people's birthdays, and it's part of your genius is that it comes out so freely. I'll ask you this question. If we said to you, Macca, this is your last sporting event you're going to go to, and you've got so much love for horse racing and football and athletics and the Olympic Games, is there one that if you could go to just one more, what would you choose?
It'll be the Olympics. Yeah. It'll be sitting in the athletic stadium. That's for me the ultimate, and that includes Melbourne Cups and whatever's. And I love racing. I absolutely adore it. The first 5 minutes of an AFL Grand Final. Oh God, how good's that? And you just want the last 5 to be as good. So the Bulldogs Sydney 2016. It doesn't get much better than that. And I'm talking to somebody who's invested in it because it was Dennis Cometti's last call and all that. So that sort of stuff is precious. But for me, it's the Olympics. Now I say that, Das, without having called a World Cup final in soccer, and not calling a Boxing Day test. So there are other things, but for me, it's the Olympic Games, and within the Olympic Games, it's athletics. It doesn't get, for me, any bigger than that. And when you think about the 100 metres or the marathon, I mean, the challenge of both, but the 100 metres, not everyone, but nearly the whole world can put on a pair of shoes and run. So if you're the fastest woman or man in the world over 100 metres, that's the heavyweight championship of the world, in my opinion.
And how do you get a tiny island like Jamaica it's just as random as that is, that incredible sprinting DNA that comes out of that part of the world? I mean, how does that normally happen?
Well, it's genetic, it must be, but it's also what's happened before. And those that have guided, Don Quarry it was actually in the 1950s, 48s and 50s, where they had some incredible Herb McKinley and George Roden. They were the first of the great Jamaican runners, to be honest. And then Don Quarry in the 1970s, 1976, he won the 200 metres in Montreal. So they've had that to look at, and then of course Shelley-Ann Fraser-Price and Bolt. Yeah, it doesn't get any better. Think about Botswana. So Tobago, let's say Tobago's running tomorrow night. So he's the 200 metre Olympic champion at 21 years of age. He's the world junior record holder at 100 metres. 2.5 million people in Botswana. 2.5 million people. Half of New Zealand. How does it happen? And the Botswanan men's 4x400 metre team got beaten by 1/10 of a second at the end of that race. How does that happen? 2.5 million people. So it's really interesting, isn't it? How there's no rules in a way. So Tobago and his group are going to create a legend, and that's what we're hoping, maybe that Gout can create, like, for those to follow. So we'll see. But at the moment, track and field right here in Australia is going through one of the most exciting time I can remember in my lifetime.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Gout could be the flag bearer. He might be. It's a lot to ask of a 17-year-old, but he could be.
Mackie, I want to go back. You mentioned your beautiful wife, Annie, and the family life, and you had such a great, close connection. You work together, and I've had the pleasure of working with Sam, who's doing a great job carving out his own media career, and Alex is doing the same. But how have you been able to balance this great passion of yours to travel and be on planes and family life? How did you make that work?
I've had a wife who's been very giving, and that's the truth, because I've been away a lot, Das, and I lived in Adelaide we went back to Adelaide at the end of 1999, and that was for family reasons. And so that meant a lot of travel, and it meant that Annie had to sacrifice a lot of her career. The children were young, sacrifices had to be made, and it's only now when I look back, Das, and think about it even more now, how much she gave up and how much support she's been. So it's a team effort.
Yeah.
So, we do work closely together. I rely on her so much. Hopefully I help her as well. So I've been fortunate. And I think Annie probably also, as I said, she's sacrificed a lot. She realised early on how important it was for me and how much of my life it is. And it's who I am, to be honest. I wanted to call the Melbourne Cup when I was 5, and nothing's changed. So it's weird. It's a bit odd, and I'm probably a bit blinkered. But she gets me. She understands what makes me tick, I think.
We all are born different. As we grow, the experiences we have develop into outlooks uniquely our own, charting our life's course. No one sees an idea, opinion, or opportunity like you. And no one sees you like VU. Victoria University. Uniquely you.
At Aleda, our signature program, Aleda Connect, is something we're really passionate and proud of. We bring together groups of 5 to 6 people around the globe from diverse backgrounds, sport, industry, social venture and the arts, who come together to learn, to connect and to collaborate.
The thing that I've loved about it is not just the meetings that we have with our group, it's the thinking that you do for days and days afterwards. Someone says something and it sparks a thought, and I found that I would go back and look at things that I was doing in a different light. Within my sport and within women's sport, I'm just someone who I try to lead by keeping people talking about the issues. There's times when I think the person I'm trying to convince is not listening to me. It actually got me thinking about, okay, this is how I need to address my communication with them. So it was so valuable, and the little group that we've got is great, and I'm really looking forward to sort of continuing to connect with them into the future, because we're all so very different. I can't tell you how much I enjoyed it.
Going back to you as a 5-year-old, you grew up in Adelaide. Dad was an accountant. As I said before, school wasn't necessarily easy for you, and then you work at Telecom for 5 years. What advice would you, like young people about to start that journey, it's not as though it was just all laid out for you. What advice do you give young people that want to follow something they love?
Keep dreaming, absolutely, because my dream was to be a race caller, stroke sports broadcaster. Keep dreaming. And the 3 things, Das, I really wanted to do was play league, call the Melbourne Cup, play league footy and test cricket, and 1 out of 3. But look, there were times in my middle of my teenage years and late teenage years that I lost the dream. I thought it was impossible. Telecom for 5 years, played a bit of footy and cricket and all those things, but I absolutely thought there was no chance. And look, it's too long a story today, but there was just an unbelievable chance happening that gave me an opportunity. And from that, everything's flowed. But I'd prepared for it. I'd practiced calling as a young kid. So I think for anyone that has a dream, prepare for it in a way so when an opportunity arises, you can actually walk through the figuratively door and take advantage of that. So don't give the dream up, and don't give up the practicing and the preparation in a way. It might lead to nothing, but that chance happening, then you can take advantage. You've got to be able to supply something. You've got to be able to give something when you give that opportunity. It's either got to be a brilliant call, a great voice, or some knowledge. So you can't just walk in thinking that people owe you something. You've got to be able to give them something in return, and then you're off and running.
Mac, I love this opportunity to sit down from incredible people like you, and we're saying that success leaves clues. Your passion's so clear, and you just described that you were ready when the door opened and that chance meeting, and we see these patterns of what great leadership looks like. I want to ask this idea in the world we're in with a leader that you've got to fill your own cup up first before you can be any good for anyone else. What do you do to fill your cup up?
It's tricky because you don't really think about it too much, but this is what I do. I make sure that I'm prepared to do absolutely the best performance I can do, whether it be calling a football match or talking at a production meeting or whatever. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm, under the whip all the time, but it just means that I know that if I can't do a really good job, then those people around me will look at that and maybe, I like to lead, Dar. So I guess I'll get to the core of it. You talk about going into a broadcast box and things like that. I've been in a position where I've been generally the host. I've been experienced. I've had the veteran, whatever it might be. It wasn't always that way, obviously, because, going through the ranks myself. So when a young caller like yourself or, whoever it might be that comes in, Matthew Richardson, whoever, I've often been there when ex-footballers or young broadcasters are starting. So I do think to myself, okay, what is it that I would like to do to help these people? And for me, the first most important thing is that they look up to me and think that I'm good. They look up to me and think that I'm a good person and a good broadcaster. And after that, everything flows in a way. And then you go about sharing the load, sharing the responsibilities, and making sure that everybody has a voice and that everybody is playing a role that suits the telecast in this instance, but also plays to their strengths. We've all got different things to offer. So one of the things that I am consistent with is if let's say it's Richo, young Richo, Matthew Richardson, you'd say to Richo, I want you to come here with 3 things that are yours for the telecast. They're not mine, they're not Dennis's, they're not Darth's. They're yours, Richo. Come here with 3 authentic things and just think about them and talk about them pre-match, and then make sure during the call that you cover them off at some stage, even if they're not as relevant as they were at the start of the match. So you've got a game plan, and the game plan is yours, not mine. So it's empowering them. When I started doing that or thinking that, I didn't think that as being a leader. I just thought that because it was the right thing for them. That's how I thought. So that's a really simple way of talking about some leadership in the role as a veteran sports broadcaster.
And you won't remember this, but you did that for me. My first game on television was with you. It might have been in Tassie. It was a Bulldogs game, and they rostered me on, and I'd called on radio, but you're overwhelmingly nervous, and you did exactly that. I think you said, take the first bounce. I'm going to give you the space. I'm going to let you come in. And then at quarter time, you came in and you said, you're fine, mate. You're going to be fine. And just the reassurance of having someone alongside you was, the old school was sort of, hey, young fella, earn your stripes and we'll make life hard for you. So I think that's a great gift that you've passed on to people. And I think you can see that team element. And it stays with people. You know when people help you at the start, don't you? You do. You remember that for life.
I've always felt that the better the people around you, the better you are. I've learned from everyone, Darth. So that day, I do remember that day. You were good. And I reckon I would have picked 2 or 3 things up from you that day that probably improved me. And this sounds weird, and people are saying you're being disingenuous. I've never worked on anything where I haven't picked up something. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to use it, but it gets into your mind and gives you a different way of looking at things. So you learn from everybody. But as I said earlier, the better people are around you, the better you become as well. And what you wouldn't have realised that day, Luke, was that I was not as nervous as you, but I was nervous. Not for you, but for me. So every time I do anything, there's an anxiety. There's a fear of failing, and there's a fear of not doing well. I'll have it tomorrow night with the athletics. I have it every time I do anything. So I was nervous as you were, but maybe not quite.
Probably not that level, but I'm fascinated at 71 and have done it all, that you still feel that performance pressure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, it's various degrees. I'm probably the most comfortable I am when the headsets are on and it's started. And then it's a matter of working and thinking and enjoying. But up until that point, that first host, that first voiceover, you know what it's like. The first time, no matter what, every time I do the races on a Saturday, 1 minute to 12, I'm thinking, God. So what I try and do, Das, is make sense of it all. What am I trying to achieve in the first minute? Clarity is so important. It is so important. Don't get muddled. Keep it simple. If there's a big thing to say it. Don't say it twice, say it once. Work with the pictures, work with your co-hosts. So just have a real understanding of what the producer is wanting from you and what the audience might be expecting. So that calms me a bit, and then off you go, and then you settle in. And then I think to myself, and this is what I say to a lot of people, when they start, and some people come even much rawer than you were, Das, because you had some experience. They're thrown in the deep end, really deep end. And I'll say to them, do you know anything about athletics? Knowing they're, Commonwealth Games gold medalists. Yeah, you'll be right. You'll be right, because you know what you're doing. Yeah. Just do it. And that's what I have to say to myself. I have to say to myself, you've done the homework. I'll give you an example. Kathy Freeman. It was in the middle of the Olympics, Monday night. I'd hosted the first week. I'd called a couple of other things. I'd called 4 nights of athletics or 3 nights of athletics and days.
That's as big a week in your life as you can get, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm fully warmed up, Das. Fully warmed up. But that Monday morning, I knew it was different. And anyway, the gate day, we get to the track. There's 4 or 5 unbelievable races already. I mean, stuff that, incredible. Out they walk for the women's 400-metre final. My mouth goes dry completely. I feel a sense of, wow, I'm in trouble. And I absolutely thought to myself, you know what you're doing. Relax. Go slow. Don't rush it. Try and take away that dryness. Use Raylene. Just enjoy it. And I actually talked myself into it. And I gun goes, relax. Not a perfect call, a good call, a perfect performance, and a good call to go with a perfect performance. But I realised that I was a bit overwhelmed. And that was, someone that had been to a lot of Olympics, had called a lot of races that week. So it's interesting, isn't it? But I was able to bring myself to a point to do a reasonable job.
Had you had that experience before?
No.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And people might say, oh, you've picked the one big race. That's the only race. There've been other times, men's 100 final. It's funny, women's 100 final is huge, but there's something about the men's 100 final that's, and it's not being gender, I hate to do it because the women's 100 final is just as important.
Yeah.
But the men's 100 final does bring out something else in me, in the broadcaster. Often it's because it's Bolt or Lewis and it's historic, but it's also tricky because it's quick.
Yeah.
But Freeman's the only one that's happened to me. And it's really interesting. And I've been broadcasting now for 40 years.
One of the great moments of all time. Macca, the world's changing. Is there one thing that's worked for you in what you've done that you will never change?
About the way I go about it? A lot of things, I think, Luke. A lot of things, probably, we talked about the prep. It's also the respect for what you're doing and the privilege. You don't take it for granted. We are in it doesn't mean you can't be critical, because, criticism is part of what we do. But it's that whole understanding of, of how, I guess, the honour, what we're seeing, people would give their eye teeth to have the same seat as us, or even be at the venue. But what hasn't changed is my respect for what I'm doing. We're entertainers. That's what we are. We're not surgeons. It's not life or death. But we all do it in our own way. And what I've tried to be, I guess, what hasn't changed is authentic. I've tried to be the best Bruce I can be. And this is the other thing I've spoken to young ones over the years. Don't be the second or third best Dennis Cometti. You be the best X. You be yourself. And that's what I've tried to be. And look, Dars, there's a bit about me. There's quite a bit. I wish I wasn't. There's some of my things I do drive me mad. But it's me.
Yeah.
And in the end, you live and die by it. And I'm not going to change.
It's a pretty good version, Macca. I don't think you change it at all. But on that, has there been a visionary leader in the world that you've also followed a bit? You've always been authentically you, clearly, and we did see a lot of people wanting to be you or wanting to be Dennis. That's a pretty hard act to follow. But has there been a leader that you've followed the path of?
Well, in a broadcasting sense, Bill Collins. Now, Bill, for those that don't know, Bill Collins was a race caller in Melbourne from the late 1940s. And I grew up, Dars, listening to him. And he was absolutely, to me, the most outstanding broadcaster of any sport I'd ever heard as a young boy. Now, I've heard a lot of people since. I loved his style, I loved his accuracy, and I liked the entertaining way he did it. So I modelled myself really on Bill. In the end, I didn't want to call the Melbourne Cup. I wanted to be Bill. And I wrote to him when I was 11 from Adelaide. Or Mum wrote the letter probably. I wrote the letter and Mum told me what to say. But so there you go. And then I got to meet him, obviously, and work with him a bit. So through a broadcasting sense, there were people like Bill Collins, Alan McGilvray, John Arlott, cricket commentators, football commentators in Adelaide, Max Hall and Tom Warhurst, that your father would have known, David Darcy would have known well. Great callers. Mike Williamson, those people, Doug Hayward, and then more my contemporaries, people like Tim Lane that I've looked up to over the years. And you're sort of the same age almost as. So there's been a lot of, and then international broadcasters like Bob Costas and Al Michaels and those people who I've sort of got to know a bit over the years. So there's been a lot of that I've looked at and heard and feel Liggett, God. So there's a long list. And you say, I'm not them, but boy, how they go about it and how they do it and their timing. So you do pick up things. So on-air people, a lot. And even, today, the young callers, so many that are so good. We ran into one in Howie coming in here today. And they all do it differently. But they've all got something. And, I admire it. There's been a lot on air. There's a few off air that have paved a way for me in terms of, I guess, decision-making, attitude. So there's been quite a few people.
Macca, you mentioned your inherent curiosity earlier. How does that show up for you, and how do you overlay that into your world?
But the more you know about anything, the more interesting it becomes. And this is work and non-work. So one of my faults, Dars, I've got a few, is obsession. So one of the problems I've got, if I dip my toe in the water, I can go down rabbit holes. And I can't, and sometimes it takes a long time to get out. So I've got to be careful, how much I obsess about James Bond movies or Tom Waits singing or Leonard Cohen or whatever, or, John le Carre. So I've got to be careful that I don't become, because then I won't have time for anything else. So That's the style of person I am.
So you can get lost in Leonard Cohen.
Yeah, I can get lost in anything and have
I
have to pull myself out. So, and that's what I do with my job and my work. So the curiosity is, it comes from, a very young age. Dylan Thomas's poetry, I was probably more interested in the fact that he died at 39 and how he died, but what made him tick, as much about the words that he wrote, Bob Dylan named himself after him and all those things. So those little things as you're growing up, they stay with you, Das. You're still being influenced, but early influences are forever, and they're richer and deeper. And they're with you for the rest of your life. And they're part of who you become. And whether they are your parents who guided you in a certain way or somebody you listened to or read and they lifted you and made you feel like you're going to a place that's hard to get to and you never want to leave, they're with you forever.
We're a bit obsessed about this idea of collaboration in what we're trying to achieve in Aleda and connecting people around the globe. Have you got an example of a great collaboration in your life?
Look, a few, but they can be fleeting. There are individual people that I might go to for advice. There's people that you won't know. There was one man particularly who, his name was Fred Jones. He's no longer with us, and he really helped me a lot, just through his knowledge, but also his guidance in the right way about doing things. He was like, I had the most brilliant father, but I was lucky. He was like a bit of a second father for me. And he was later in my life. I think every young man needs, and every young woman needs somebody away from their parents at times to be a strong force in their life when you're in your teens, because you don't want to hear mum and dad sometimes. It's just the way it is. So Freddie did that for me.
How'd you find him?
Through sports broadcasting, and through racing, and just his knowledge. And then, since then, in a more recent sense, and I'll say a couple of names that you will know. Dennis had a big influence on me. He doesn't know it, but he did. Lee Matthews has had a big influence on me. I always felt that Lee could get to the bottom line quicker than anyone I've ever met. He's the most pragmatic person. And you're smiling because okay, here's an example. Late last year, Channel 7 came to me and said, Bruce, will you do the opener for the grand final? And I thought, I'd like to. Is it the right thing to do? And I talked to Annie so I went back to the people at 7, and you know who they are, Chris Jones, because Louis had left, Chris Jones and Gary O'Keefe. And I said, look, I will do it. And then Gary rang me on a Monday night and left a message, said, Macca, I'd like you not only to do that, but be involved on grand final day, but actually host the 2 prelim finals. I didn't sleep that night. I thought, I'm not up to it. I haven't seen enough football. I haven't called for 4 years. Hosting's different. I don't think I can do it. Luckily,
people find that mind-blowing.
And this is 100%.
Mind-blowing. People will not... Someone that's done everything you've done, you do that with your eyes closed. And you didn't sleep.
Didn't sleep. So I went, and I was lucky I was in Melbourne for something else, and I saw Gary the next day, and he sort of nearly talked me into it. So I went and spoke to 2 people besides Annie. One was Lee Matthews, and said, Lee, do you think this is the right thing to do? I want you to think about it. And the other was Rob Chapman. Now, Rob Chapman's a former...
Chairman of the Crows.
And somebody who I've only got to know really well in the last few years, and someone I admire. They were the only 2 people I asked. Rob, over a coffee, said, absolutely, you can do it, and you should. Be the last time they ask you. Lee came back and said, Macca, nothing wrong with you doing that. Go for it. So there's 2 examples of people that I respect, and that's why I did it, because they said yes, and I had the support of Annie.
Value in your life, isn't it, for people that, even with all your experience, and for me, I was in that broadcast, it was a no-brainer. It was, of course you're going to do it. How good for the coverage, and I just saw that as a joyful thing. But I wouldn't have known that you would have taken the time out to go to some sounding boards and thought about it. I'd have thought it would have been pick up the phone and we'll see you.
I agonised over it. And then the funniest, when I walked into the SCG for that Port Adelaide Sydney match, it was the first time in 4 years. I felt like I was home. I just felt right. And then the night, I was nervous, but the night, it's very different not calling, obviously, but I felt like I contributed in a way that was of some value because, Darcy, I didn't want to be a non-contributor. I wanted to be able to bring something. I'm proud. I'm old. I've got a pride that's important to me, and I wanted to be good. Now, how good I wasn't. I played my role. I wasn't at centre half forward. I chipped away in the forward pocket and got a couple of front and centres. And Dennis would have been proud of me. A couple of front and centres.
You've been centre half forward for a number of decades. The idea of communicating clearly is something we just see great people have it's been your whole life, how you communicate. How do you break it down? What's the essence of great communication for you?
I think clarity, in a way, because if you're going to talk to people, so let's say I'm giving an address, 15-minute address to a school. So you think to yourself, what's important for them? What might they take away? So it's horses for courses. So you construct. I always believe in an unusual start and a good ending. So, and you don't necessarily do things chronologically. So you make it interesting. It's like writing a novel. So a 15-minute short story. So that's how I guess prepare for something like that. If it's working with 3 or 4 other broadcasters on a coverage, it's throwing down a few ideas at the start of but not making sure that nobody says what you want them to say. They say what they want to say. But they might, and I'll do this on purpose. You'll go in and you might ask 3 or 4 questions to your co-commentator, not say Dennis, because he prepared very differently to me, but to your colour commentators, just to prick them a bit, but also to see how switched on they are and make sure they're right, but also to empower them, because everybody that starts that telecast has to bring something to the. So that's how that's the way I go about it, Darcy. So clarity is really important. To create a speech or some words that are resonating because they're of interest, because they are, I guess, they're relevant to what the people you're talking to are about. So there's a different speech for every group you might talk to, and there's a different message. But there's also a message of there's no complete right way, there's your way. And if you go about your way in the best possible way, and you're ethical, and you're honest, which goes with the ethics, and you're doing a job that you're proud of, it's right. There's no absolute, that's right, that's wrong. There's bits of everything that are of value. And that's the way I guess I've gone about my life.
Yeah. Is
that, easy to judge, but everybody's got something to offer. And that might be, wow, didn't think of that. Yeah, don't really agree with it, but I see where you're coming from. Or, I wish I thought of that.
Ethical and honest, I think if I was going to put a couple of words alongside Bruce McAvaney, they would be right at the top of the tree in everything that you do and everything in your life. Macca, who's been the greatest leader in your life?
It's a toss-up between Mum and Dad and Annie, I think. And that's, and you might say, oh, you're just saying that. I'm not. I had parents that were far from perfect, real battlers. Both left school at 13. Mum said saddest day of her life was when she left school. She loved education. My father went to the war, came back and studied. We had the tiniest little house and got his accountancy. He was a telegraph messenger at 13. Mum and Dad, I've got a sister and a brother that I look up to, but Annie, because I rely on her so much and I trust her judgment, and she's got my back. So there's lots of others, but that'll do, Das.
It's a great gift, Macca. I love it when people have had a family upbringing like yours and a partner like yours. It's an obvious place to go, isn't it? And you're probably pretty lucky in life, aren't you, if you have that?
Oh, absolutely. Look, that's, in many ways, we all know what life's about. You've got a beautiful family yourself and you had a wonderful father and mother, I know that. So I know how you think about yours. So that's what so much is about. But you know what? How lucky are we? because not everyone has that, and everyone has to find people that they can trust and look up to and share things with. Sharing's so important. I live a lot of my life, Das, in isolation, in my office or whatever, on planes, and when you get to share things, it makes it all worth it.
Final question before I let you go. Again, the spirit of collaboration. You've worked with incredible people around the globe, and you've had these Boys Own annual experiences. Has there been one person in any of your passions, Mackie, you thought it might be your love of music you shared before, or God, I'd love to have collaborated with? Is one person a name that springs to mind?
Gee, that's a good question, but a hard one. Look, I would love to have been at a training session with Muhammad Ali when he was Cassius Clay and he was dreaming the dream that he could be the best in the world and doing the hard yards quietly in the gym. I would love to have seen that man. That'll do.
That is a great note to finish on, and an image that'll stay with me for the day, Mac. It's been a great pleasure to have been able to spend some time with you today, but to have known you in the past. And it's an incredible story. A lot more chapters to write out. You look healthy and happy, and thanks for joining me today.
It's been a pleasure, Das.